On behalf of Donor Network of Arizona and Donate Life Arizona, we're really happy to have you here today. For those of you watching this online, and even really some of our own team members at Donor Network of Arizona, this conversation is an extension of the work done by the Multicultural Committee that Donor Network of Arizona has. That's led by our Multicultural Outreach Coordinator, Leslie Rodriguez, who will join us on the screen in a second. The main goal really is to better engage with an intersection of racial, ethnic, sexual orientation, gender expression, socioeconomic status, faith-based elements of identity, and many others. So we've had really interesting conversations and come up with innovative marketing material and really engage the community in ways that Donor Network of Arizona hasn't done in the past. So that's something really exciting. We've got a long way to go, though. Redundant is me saying that we are in a pandemic. You know this. And if you pair that with the increased visibility of the Black Lives Matter movement right now, it's really, what a time to be alive. Our mission at Donor Network of Arizona is to make the most of life through organ and tissue donation. And now that we're moving into a new era, thankfully, we want to also make that a mission with equity and inclusion for everyone. August is a special month for that, which Leslie Rodriguez will also talk about. Today's focus, African American and Black communities of Arizona. Before we bring on our panel members, though, I do want to introduce Leslie Rodriguez. As we mentioned, she leads the Multicultural Committee. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Nico. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So as Nico said, my name is Leslie Rodriguez. I am the Multicultural Outreach Coordinator. It's been a year with Donor Network of Arizona, and it's been my absolute pleasure to be able to be a part of public health outreach, specifically in Latino, Native American, Black African American, Asian American communities. The work here today is really more of an honest conversation about saving Black lives through organ donation. We're always looking for ways to educate the public, educate ourselves on what matters in the community. And so this is a very important topic dear to my heart and dear to all the people involved here today on the essence of the generosity of donation and the full stories that come with it.
Appreciate you for that. And so you and I, in our own rights, are very multicultural, but today's topic, saving Black lives through organ and tissue donation, it's not a discussion that we can have without actual Black voices. So we are honored and privileged to have a number of people sitting on the panel today, all of whom are part of the Multicultural Committee, as well as the Black African Subcommittee. So I appreciate all of you for being here. We're going to have a chance to discuss a few topics with each one of you. At this time, why don't we just dive right in, particularly at the bottom middle of your screen, Dr. Dana Jamison has a very unique and kind of multifaceted connection to donation. So let's start with you with this conversation, get the ball rolling a little bit. Particularly coming from a medical background, what do you say to those people who think, if I register as an organ donor, they're not going to save me because they want to take my organs or something along those lines? We've heard it a lot.
So, hi, Nico and everyone. Thank you for having me. Let me tell you a little bit about me first. I'm Dr. Dana Jamison, and I am a living donor recipient, having received my kidney from my husband back in December of 2000. At that time, I was a busy orthopedic surgeon, wife, mother of 3, and of course, a child of God. And I didn't have high blood pressure. I wasn't diabetic. I was not overweight. I didn't smoke. So no one was quite sure why I got kidney disease, but when I got it, it progressed very quickly. I'd been doing surgical mission work in West Africa, and they think maybe I caught something there. But within 10 months of diagnosis, I needed a transplant. Fortunately, I never had to go on dialysis, but unfortunately, I'm an only child, so I didn't have siblings to even ask. My husband gave me the gift of life, not only because he loved me, but because he loved our children. This year, our kidney will be 20 years old, and we will celebrate the 40th anniversary of our first date. So in answering your question, Nico, let me ask, do you want me to give some background about healthcare in the Black community first, or talk about fear and specifically?
You're leading the conversation. I'm just here to kind of facilitate. I think both topics are interesting and of importance. So start where you feel most comfortable.
Okay, thank you. So I think it's important to start off talking about healthcare in the Black community in general. So back in 1966, Martin Luther King made this statement: of all forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most inhumane. That was back in 1966. And what is incredible is that this is still pertinent today. In the United States, African Americans make up only 13% of the population, but we have some of the highest rates of hypertension and diabetes, heart and lung disease, breast, lung, prostate, and colon cancer. 1 in 4 of us do not have access to good health care. And that's what we call healthcare disparities. So let's talk about our need for organ donation. So in the United States, there are more than 32,000 people, African Americans, on the organ transplant waiting list now. 80% of us need kidneys. As stated, although we're only 13% of the US population, we have kidney disease that's 3 times higher than white Americans. We're 35% of the people on dialysis, and we make up 39% of the patients on the kidney waiting list. We wait an average of 3 to 5 years for an organ, and that's 3 times longer than white Americans. So in 2019, for example, in Arizona, 9 of the 97 people, and in the entire United States, 1,300 of the 32,000 African Americans who were waiting for a transplant passed away. They died while they were on the waiting list. Last year, nationally, 8,300 African Americans received organ transplants. 1,800 of us received organs from deceased donors. Here in Arizona, 94 African Americans received organs from deceased donors, but only 19 of those were from African American donors. Nationally, there were 616 African American living donors, like my husband, but only 9 African American living donors here in Arizona. So far in 2020, in Arizona, only 2 African Americans have received organs from African American living donors. What's important to know is that a kidney from a living donor, like I had, offers patients an alternative to years of dialysis and time on the national transplant waiting list. Last year, there were only 616 African American living donors for the entire country. Remembering that I said currently there are 32,000 African Americans on the organ transplant waiting list, we as African Americans do not donate at rates comparable to what we need. So I can sort of answer your question now. So
Yeah, the way you ended that last statement, I think, is really important because there's a gap there, right, with so much need, but on the other side of the coin, registration of new donors or people who step up to be living donors or families who authorize donation after someone passes away. That's what this discussion is going to be about today, and along with many other things, to close that gap.
I agree. And I will tell you, there are a number of things that impact our willingness to give. I think the first one is fear. You know, if I sign up to be an organ donor on my driver's license, does that mean they're just going to let me die so they can get my organs? Well, the answer is no. If I'm in the trauma room after a bad accident, are they just going to let me die so they can get my organs? Once again, the answer is no. I think one of the reasons we lack living donor candidates, people might say, I want to be a living donor, but I'm afraid of having surgeries to take my organs. How can I afford to be off work to recuperate? And who's going to pay for me to do this? And I think it's important to know that the cost of donating an organ is covered by the recipient's health insurance. Another reason we have fewer living donors within the African American community is a number of us have pre-existing conditions like diabetes and like high blood pressure that may exclude us from being donors. Another issue, and for lack of a better word, I'm saying we're not always matchable. And so we lack matchable deceased donors. So it's important that, as Nico just said, we all sign up to be donors, and important that we tell our families that we are doing it. In recent years, they've changed the way that they match people on the list. It used to be that you were matched mainly by your genetics or your blood type, and it was said, and that gave an advantage to white Americans. Now they look at age, time on dialysis, current disease status, and whether a patient has had a previous transplant, along with genes and blood type. This is important because African Americans have a 50% higher rejection rate and thus may need a second transplant. One of the issues, and let me say that by changing the way that we are matched, it has increased the availability of organs for our community. So another issue is mistrust of the medical community. Take this example. I don't get to see the best doctors and I don't get the best medicine. So what's the deal? Well, that is called healthcare disparities. And it is unfortunately a significant issue among the African American and other people of color within the United States. If we don't have access to the best care, nor even know how to get it, we will tend to be sicker longer. It is sometimes said that your zip code may be more important than your genetic code. And rectifying these disparities and increasing health literacy are key factors to saving Black lives. We tend to lack awareness of transplantation, about it being a viable choice for us as African Americans. Along with that, African Americans tend to not get on the list as fast as other Americans. It could be cultural, it could be medical, provider related. There are a number of factors. So this, I think, is the most concerning one. Financial concerns. If I get a transplant, how am I going to afford to be able to pay for all this medicine for the rest of my life? Well, if you don't have health insurance, whether it be private or Medicare or Medicaid access here in Arizona, there is something called the Affordable Care Act, the healthcare marketplace. And through that, all Americans can have access to healthcare. So I'm going to finish by saying today in Arizona, there are 171 African Americans on organ transplant waiting list. 159 of those are waiting for kidneys. We as a community, as a people, need to sign up to donate. It's one thing we can do to save Black lives through organ donation. Thank you.
I really appreciate you for your insight, particularly with an extensive medical background professionally, right? Because at one point you worked in the ICU and now orthopedics?
So at one point I was a trauma surgeon. I've always been an orthopedic trauma surgeon. After I had my transplant almost 20 years ago, I stopped doing surgery. So the main thing I do now is wound care.
Cool. So we're very lucky to have you on this panel here, and thank you for sharing some of that insight. Next speaking in this conversation is Kim Davis, who is not only on the Black and African American subcommittee of the Multicultural Efforts Donor Network of Arizona has, but an employee with us as well. So give us some of your thoughts based on what Dr. Jamison was talking about. What's your reaction to that? And let's also talk about fear in the Black community as it relates specifically to organ donation.
Yeah, Dr. Jamison gave us a lot of information to digest, and thank you for doing that. Fear does play a major role, right? Like that's one of the biggest, but also another part of that is the lack of awareness. of how amazing organ donation is and what it can do for our community. So back to fear, healthcare in the Black community, or medicine in the Black community, has had this unpleasant history, right? And almost unpleasant isn't even a word I even want to use. I want to use something bigger. Um, but it's not only history of or past tense, it's current, it's present. That fear is right now in 2020. And Nico, you brought up Black Lives Matters. Um, that's a hot topic right now, right? Like everybody is talking about it. It's a trending hashtag. And part of their focus or their mission statement is to talk about access to quality healthcare for the Black community. So health disparities isn't new for us in the Black community. We have been loudly shouting for equality and justice. And we know that inequality takes on many forms, not just racial inequality and injustice and police brutality, but I'm specifically talking about healthcare. Now, Dr. Jamison brought up some medical issues that are plaguing the Black community, right? Chronic kidney disease, diabetes, obesity. All those things are really plaguing our community, but they grow from the same roots that underlie poverty, hunger. If you're poor and hungry, you're going to eat whatever is available to you, right? He spoke about limited access to healthcare and other social disparities. So those are some big major topics. I know that Black people are disproportionately affected by the lack of organ donors, right? Because of some of those disparities. But I know there's something we can do about it, right? We can help heal the Black community. So, yeah, that's my thought.
If anyone else has anything to chime in, feel free to unmute your mic. But I do want to ask, because you kind of pair two topics that may be obstacles to each other, right? Because we're talking about fear. We also said there's just also a simple lack of awareness. And I don't think that's specific to the Black community. I think there's a lack of awareness across cultures, ages, all those intersections. But when we're talking about the Black community specifically, when there's this fear and distrust specifically in the healthcare system in the United States, how do you make someone aware of this amazing life-saving and healing gift when they don't trust it to begin with, right? Wouldn't someone who's scared not want to even listen, or maybe only filter the message through their own experience that they've already had? What do you think the best way would be to kind of approach something like that?
Oh, was that for, sorry, was that me, Nico? And you're just throwing it out there. Okay.
Yeah, for anyone who has thoughts on that, because we were talking about fear, but you also brought up the lack of awareness.
Yes.
You don't know what you don't know, right? And if you're afraid of a barrier that's in front of that, then you're never going to know it. How do we break that barrier?
Oh, absolutely. Like, organ donation wasn't talked about in my family, in my community. I didn't hear about it until I was a grown-up, so to speak. So it just wasn't available, whether it was, I didn't hear about it in my church, I didn't hear about it, and I had an uncle who was on dialysis for 13 years before he died. He had other health issues, but I didn't hear about donation. So just the lack of awareness, I'm not sure where that's coming from, but I just know it's not out in our community.
Understood.
I'd like to add, if I may.
Of course.
Education. We need to be educated. Whether it's a PSA blitz, as in a commercial, a Twitter feed, an Instagram, a TikTok, tell people, children in school, when they learn about other health-related things, talk to them about organ donation and say, when you go home tonight, ask your mommy and daddy if they've registered to donate. It may be shocking, but send them home with a nice little Donor Network of Arizona pamphlet, or just something, so that we as a community know not to fear it and to know why it's needed.
We want to tap into a little bit of the experience that Patricia has. Patricia, well, before we even started recording this today, before this was even a possibility, I was so excited that we started working on something like this. And I imagine, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I imagine you are even more so because you have such a history, specifically with Donor Network of Arizona and organ donation in our state. So share your thoughts on that if you don't mind. But we also specifically would like to hear from you. Like, what do you think we in general collectively can do to help the Black community, and what can people within the Black community do as a whole to help?
Thank you, Nico. My name is Patricia Pace Anderson, and I've been working for Donor Network for 22 years. And as the organ procurement organization, my role is donor program development manager, and that's to really go out into hospitals and provide education to hospitals on the donation program. But what I have experienced is what I want to do in answering your question, Nico, what can we do to help the Black community? Dr. Dana Jamison, she mentioned how many deaths occur every year on the list. How many people have died? What we want to do, this committee that we're on, we want to be very proactive. We want to provide education. But historically, which Dr. Jamison also mentioned, we didn't have this information. So with social media, whether it's TikTok or Facebook or all of the links that are available, we're bringing it forward. But those social media outlets have not been in existence for very long. So we have to get out and talk to our families. But what I want to reference back to what Dr. Jamison said is how many Black lives are dying. Black lives are dying not just in the streets. They're dying in hospitals. They're dying at home. Their lives are shortened by being on dialysis for so long because we don't have the organs that are the best match for us. This is what I want whoever is listening to this today. This is what we can do. We as Black people can do for our community is to save Black lives through organ donation. Kidney disease is really killing our people as well. And so we want to get those kidney transplants and be able to help restore life to our families and our Black communities across this country. It's very important that we do that. So in going home and talking to your families, it's important. Touch on our links that you'll be seeing at the end of this presentation. We'll show our links, how you can go and sign up to be a donor. I registered to be a donor when I got my permit at the Motor Vehicle Department. That was several years ago. I just want y'all to know. So it's been on my driver's license for that long. But just like Kimberly said, we didn't talk about it. I mean, we checked the box. We told our parents. We didn't really know what was entailed, what it entailed, or how it even would happen. But we always said, well, shoot, I'm not going to be needing it when I die. So I might as well let somebody else have it. This is the thought that we can take back to our community. And I am so glad that we're touching on that. Our next presenter is going to be touching on that religious piece that really sometimes is a hang up for us moving forward to give that gift. It's not because we don't want to. It is that fear that I don't know what's going to happen if when I die, but maybe I should keep everything. So there's some good information that'll be coming from our next presenter. But what I want everybody to know as I end is we can save Black lives in our Black community through organ donation. It can happen. We can stop 1,327 deaths of Black people from dying if we sign up to be donors. So let's embrace it. Let's embrace each other and commit to getting information and talking about it out loud to save lives through organ donation.
Very powerful, Patricia. I appreciate you for that. And before we do get to the religious element of this conversation, an important element, right? I think that's something that the Latino and the Black communities have in common. That foundation of religion and the family and the neighborhood life is huge. So let's get to that in a second. But as you were mentioning, by signing up for people outside of Donor Network or outside of healthcare, one person could save up to 8 lives through organ donation. One person alone. So it's pretty impactful what the checking the box, it's so quick of a decision, but the implications are huge. And there's also ocular and tissue donation. You can go on and restore vision for up to 4 people now with advances in science and technology, and heal up to 75 people with tissue donation. That's just one person. That's one person has so much potential. And so when we're talking about, Nori, and this question will be directed for you, when we're talking about engaging with the Black community, and we often get some resistance, and that's not just the Black community. Religion sometimes comes up as a reason, and not necessarily, oh, my religion is against it, though some people may say that. Some people just may say, I don't even know what my religion thinks about it. So you, Norian, as a recipient and a donor mother and a faith-based community member, I think you have some really good insight for us. What do you tell people when they say that to you?
Well, a lot of the issues that I've noticed in talking with people regarding religion is they don't know if God has an issue with that. And it's also a concern about not leaving all of their loved one intact. And so those are some of the concerns that I've noticed in talking with people. But I've been raised in a Christian background. And in my studying, one of the things that stick foremost in my upbringing and my religious experience is the relationship of love. And in families, there's nothing that we won't do for our children. And I was raised in an era where it takes a village, or the circle of life, people helping people. And when you look at it from a Christian background, that's what God was. He was love, and he healed, and he went about ministering in that form. So when I was going through scripture, in my journey, the first thing that God showed me was that in Genesis, in the 2nd chapter and verses 21 and 22, he showed me that he performed the first surgery and he performed the first transplant. Because when Adam was created from the dust of the earth, after he was created, God caused Adam to go into a deep sleep. He removed the rib from his side. Once he closed the rib, his side, then he took that rib in creating Eve. That's the transplant. So I've been able to share with a lot of people that when we put others' needs ahead of ours, that's pleasing to God, because we're helping someone else. So he set the example, and we as Christians, we are to follow the practice of Christ. And so when he guided me to those scriptures, it helped me to know that when making those decisions, even in regards to our son, God has blessed him with life. And when his journey in life had ended, the blessing and the honor that we give to God is to help someone else. So it wasn't an issue for us when we got the call. And because our son was such a people person, that he was blessed with good health. And so if something that he had could help with someone else, that was priority for us. And so we donated from him, but we also received, because a year after his passing, then my husband, was diagnosed with leukemia, and he received bone marrow and stem cell from a live donor. A year later, I received a kidney transplant. I had been on dialysis for 7 years. But going back to the religion, I looked up in Mark 12, verse 13. And in it, it says, God says that we should treat and love our neighbors as ourselves. So in me donating from our son, we were showing love to someone that we consider our neighbor, whether we knew them or not. That doesn't matter. I love them because Christ loves them and because Christ loved me and our family. But then when my husband and I needed a transplant, his was live. But the one thing I think about when I think about God is love. When I think about my fellow man is love. When we got the message that his donor was a perfect match, this man sent a message to my husband, that said, tell the man in Phoenix that I'm honored to help him. This person doesn't know us. But again, it goes back to the generosity of loving our brothers, our neighbors, as God loved us. And so we were able to get the bone marrow stem cell from him. When I needed the kidney transplant, I got my donation from a deceased person. And the first thing that came to mind when they took me in to do my operation, my first request was to pray for the family that had lost their loved one, because now God was using them as a vessel to bless me with life. And so when I speak to people regarding the aspect from a Christian background, what honor can we give God when we share the blessing with others that he's given to us? Along with that, that has been a blessing for me and my family, to know that when our journey has ended, we can bless someone else. And that's, to me, the circle of life. In our family, we've gone full circle. We've grieved, we've lost, we donated. In my instance, someone else lost, grieved, but their love for humankind, they donated, which allows me to be here with you all today. And I share my experience. And that's one thing in our communities, because we are so afraid to give and because we haven't had a lot of the knowledge, I'm able to be used as a vessel, because now they saw my struggle through illness. They saw my life now after transplant. And so I feel it's my pleasure and my obligation to get out and share with others my experience. So as they're going through, they can look and see that I got the best of care. Being a
Mm-hmm.
donor or not, I still got the best of care. My husband got the best of care. And so just trying to educate them that they're going to be taken care of, but looking from God's aspect, what he did for us on Calvary and laying down his life, what better way can we exemplify his life but by passing on the legacy that God gave us to someone else? That's the avenue that I use. And I pray that it helps someone. I pray that as long as God allows me life, that I can continue to be a blessing with someone else.
Yeah, that was really insightful, and for at least for me, that's not kind of a discussion path that I would have even thought of. But someone who is of Christian faith, if you were to ask them, do you think Adam is either incomplete or invalid because he's one rib short, I don't think anybody would say yes, right? So that's really, I'm gonna remember that because these conversations come up quite a bit. I'm sure you know better than I.
And
As a follow-up to your story, though, before we started recording, we did want to take a moment to honor your son. You said today was his birthday, right?
yeah.
And so we appreciate you and the sacrifices your family made and continue to do so in terms of public outreach and your volunteering, and particularly with your church, all in honor of your son, as well as you and your husband as different kinds of recipients. So thank you so much for that.
You know, can I say one more thing that I've noticed in talking with people? They look at the resurrection part.
Sure,
One
yeah.
thing that God showed me, and that is that when we die, we return to the dust. We were formed from dust, we will return to dust. And some people feel that, how could God resurrect them if they're not all intact? And one thing he showed me was that when we die, we return to dust, and his spirit returns back to him, which is God's breath. But when resurrection time comes, God said that when he raises us up, we will have put on the form, the godly form, the immortal form. We won't have the diseased, sinful body that we were laid in the ground with. When he rises us up, we will take the immortal spirit of his body. And so it doesn't matter that what we had when we pass is in place, because he's not going to use anything that's damaged of earth. We will become brand new with the spirit, immortal spirit of him. Because when you go to heaven, you can't take the earthly damaged stuff. He's going to give you his spirit. And so that should give us all comfort to know that when this is over, this is over. We don't want this state anymore. We want to be able to have that spiritual state like he has. So we don't have to worry about everything intact, because we're going to be brand new. When he wakes us up, we will have the spirit of him.
Yeah, and that leads me to a point, and someone with more experience here may be able to either piggyback or correct me. But on your point about dust to dust, if I donate my heart after I pass away, that person eventually will also pass away, and almost never is a donated organ redonated. That your organ, your entire being will still eventually end up either in the ground or whatever that person's funeral arrangements are. So the dust to dust still comes true whether you're a donor or not.
Right.
So I appreciate you for those points. For the people who are watching and still staying tuned into this conversation, we haven't said very much about how you can register. And I think that's really important, particularly in a time where access to the MVD right now is a little bit more difficult than normal. No offense to them, they are great partners to us, but they're doing their best to keep the public and their employees safe, so they are limiting the number of people who can make appointments and go in person, which is where we happen to get more than 95% of new organ, eye, and tissue donor registrations. It's a little bit down right now. So don't wait until you need a new ID or until you have to renew your vehicle registration, for example, though those will be options when you do that. DonateLifeAZ.org. You can do that right now. We did the math. It only takes 38 seconds. So certainly something to consider. Coming from Donor Network of Arizona standpoint, we are not here to strong arm anyone into registering. What our goal is to make the most of life through organ and tissue donation, and that is made possible because someone says yes to sharing life when they're no longer needed on this planet, whatever their beliefs may be. But even if someone says no, right, Patricia, we respect, at the end of the day, someone's end of life decision. And if it's a no, we're going to respect that equally as a yes. We just want to make sure that it's an informed no or yes for that matter. What's your perspective on that?
That's correct, because that's why it's so important to talk to your families. We respect the no. We respect the yes. We respect the I don't know, because you may not have that decision right now. It may take meeting someone or hearing someone present on how their life was changed through donation and being a recipient. And it may take that. We're here to plant the seed and provide the information and the education for you to talk about it with your families, to think about it, ponder it, and see if this is something for you. And as Nico has said, and all of us have said, we're here to save lives. And we want to provide the education to you that will help you make a decision one way or the other as to whether you feel that this is based on your values and beliefs, and if this is something you would like to do.
Before we wrap up, I did want to give Leslie another shot, and we'll put you on the spot here. Sorry about that. Because we hadn't heard too much from you, but you lead the multicultural outreach for Donor Network of Arizona. You are heading the committee. You are part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that we're using internally at Donor Network of Arizona. Under normal circumstances, right? What is ideal outreach for you? What is your goal in the work that you do, and how can we help you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Nico. The way I view public education and public outreach is that my fight is also my neighbor's fight, and my neighbor's fight is my fight. And as a woman of color, right now, I can't relate to the experience of being a Black woman. That's not my experience here on Earth, but I am a woman of color. And if I can do something to alleviate the pain of a fellow human being, then I will do my best to do that. And the conversations in multicultural communities are all very different to each culture, but in the overarching, overall feelings tend to be very similar in that health disparities and lack of education and the mistrust and fear are all very based in similar history. So though I cannot empathize with someone's specific feelings of loss, of wanting to, someone's feelings of loss or really having the need of a change, like an organ to continue their life's mission, I can help with that. And I know the team can help with that. And really what the multicultural committee is being able to have these conversations, regardless if the decision is yes or no to sign up, to just have the communication, the education piece of being aware that that is a choice that we can make and that we can have this discussion with our family members, with our neighbors, and that I can make and can control a little bit in my world. And that's the decision that I get to make beforehand. And that's where signing up really comes up. And being able to have these conversations like we're having here, that is what the community focuses on. That is what multicultural outreach is, being able to hear what the community has to say as well. And I think today we have talked in a lot of the conversations that I hear when I, pre-COVID at health fairs. Many times I'm the first person that's approached someone with this topic, or it's the first time that they're curious in coming up. And I truly want to thank everyone on the panel here today, specifically Kim, Dr. Jamison, Patricia, Ms. Marian Rees, for all the work that you do, not only in our organization, but also taking that extra step everywhere you go to educate the public, and for participating in very important events that were somewhat new to DNA as of the past year, but something that's been in history here for a long time, and specifically Juneteenth and MLK March and festivals, and for allowing the time and educating us on the importance of, as well, of speaking up and really making this conversation about saving Black lives.
I appreciate that. It was beautifully said. And to wrap this up, I didn't say too much about what I do. I'm the media relations coordinator for Donor Network of Arizona. So that essentially means I'm a professional storyteller. And I like that. And since day one, it has also been my personal mission to diversify the stories that are told. And I know with Noreen Reese and Dr. Jamison, we've had opportunities like with the short story in the calendar, for example. And I know there's been some media opportunities, whether they work out or not, to the two of you for being available and willing to do such things is, I think, really powerful, because it's one thing to talk about people who, for example, pass away and become a donor when we honor them. And that is one of our kind of the pillars of Donor Network of Arizona. But for the people doing the legwork, such as you two, in a position of influence, either in faith or in medicine, and to also be Black voices, I think that's very powerful. So our organization is lucky to have people like you in our corner. With that being said, unless anybody has any final words of wisdom, we can wrap this up here again. And reminder to the people watching, you see the link at the bottom of your screen. All you have to do is type in donatelifeaz.org online, and I promise you it takes only 38 seconds. And if not, once you see the checkbox at the MVD, something we certainly hope you consider, and you can reach out to our organization anytime on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, maybe eventually TikTok. We're working on it. And we have people available to answer any questions and provide you with information at any time. To all of you here with us today, I appreciate you for joining us on this panel and providing your insight, wisdom, knowledge, and experience. And I hope we do this again very soon.